Dan,
Morning, Denver. How are you?
good. Just testing my audio, so everything
Yeah,
works.
that's not a bad idea. All right, good morning, everyone. We're still waiting for a few more committee members to show up so that we have a quorum. But in the meantime, I'll walk through our rules and procedures so that that is out of the way. And then when we have quorum, we can do roll call and start the meeting. So first off, this is the October 5th, 2023 meeting of the Ohio City Design Review Committee. Our virtual meeting regulations and procedures are as follows. The meeting shall be conducted according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Recusal due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the start of any presentation. Committee member will then leave the meeting for the duration of the case discussion. No presentation submissions will be accepted after the deadline. The chair will call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call of the committee. The administrator will introduce the first project and provide some background information if applicable. The meeting will then be turned over to the applicant to proceed through their presentation. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the committee. Once the presentation is concluded, the administrator will review or will read any received comments. The committee will then begin deliberations and project review. Please use the raised hand feature if you'd like to speak. After deliberations and review concludes, the committee will render its recommendation and vote. Today, since we're looking at 3 concept plans, so no votes will be taken. But there will be committee discussion and some back and forth. So all the projects will follow that same format until all the projects are heard by the committee. Once all projects have been heard, the chair will call for any committee or administrative reports. After all reports have been heard, the chair will adjourn the meeting. Regarding community comments, any and all community members may provide their written comments, thoughts, or questions regarding the projects presented to the committee for review and approval. Community members may also telephone their comments or questions to the committee administrator. All comments, thoughts, or questions must be submitted to the committee administrator, which is myself, no later than 48 hours prior to the start of the meeting. Public comment or submissions made after the deadline will not be heard by the committee. Public comment will be collected by Landmark staff and sent to the committee members for review prior to the scheduled meeting, and staff will summarize the received comments. The applicant of the project is under no obligation to answer any community questions. Community members are invited to attend the design review meetings, but there will be no open public comment period. Just as a reminder, all projects follow the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation, and all projects are being considered for an issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. All projects are considered on a case-by-case basis. The Ohio City Design Review Committee is advisory to the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. Recommendations by this committee are not final actions. Depending on the scope of the project, submissions may be approved administratively or will need to be reviewed by the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. In that case, projects will be scheduled at the next available commission meeting after an action is taken. So with all that being said, just see if we have, looks like we have quorum. I don't see Mr. Wall here. Margaret, would you be willing to act as chair?
No. Sure. Unless you want Alex.
Alex
Okay.
has an item on
That's
the
right.
agenda.
He's
So I
recused.
thought
So
it would
yes,
be-
I would be happy
yeah.
to. Okay.
So yeah, if you want to, I guess, ask for a roll call and call the meeting to order.
All right. Yeah, we'll call the meeting to order for the October 5th Ohio City Design Review. I will call roll. Mr. Frondorf.
Here.
Mr. Pearson.
Here.
Mr. Talley.
Here.
Oh, and it does look like Doug has joined us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Doug, are you with us here?
Yeah. I don't know. Do you want to cede control?
I will, yes. Doug, you're in
right.
charge again.
All right, Doug. Margaret just
right.
called the meeting to order, so we're just doing roll call. So I can run through them real quick now that you're here. So we have Mr. Frondorf.
Here.
Ms. Flaherty? Ms. Land?
Here.
Mr. Lozier is not present. Ms. Marinucci? Present. Mr. Persons?
Here.
Mr. Talley?
Here.
And Mr. Wall.
Here.
All right, Mr. Chair, we have quorum. As I said at the beginning, or before the meeting started, we have 3 concept reviews before us today. There are a few different case numbers as 2 of the concepts involve both demolitions and new constructions, but no vote will be taken. So we'll just see the presentations and there will be some discussion. And first off, we have case numbers OC 23-51 and OC 23-52 at 2429 West Superior Street, the Bridgeworks project, and it's I guess a revised iteration from what we've seen previously. So it looks like we've got Mr. Graham Vasey here. So if you want to introduce anyone else from your
Just
project
for the
team,
record,
Graham, and then-
it's West Superior Viaduct.
Oh, it is the viaduct. Okay.
Because it's obviously confusing. But Brandon Klein from Geis is going to be leading the presentation, but appreciate being in front of this group again.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Brandon, if you want to go ahead, just let me know when you'd like me to advance your slides.
So this project has been around for a few years, and we've been brought on board to kind of help progress this along and get this to a point where it can move forward. So we wanted to come to the board here to present the latest concept and how we're going to make adjustments to get this project moving and hopefully moving quickly. Brandon Klein with Geis Companies, our Vice President of Design. We're working on behalf of Bridgeworks LLC, which is a joint group between Michael Panzica, Graham, and Marika. If you want to go next slide. Just to give a context to where the project is, it's right at the corner of West 25th and the Detroit Bridge. Next slide. A little bit more zoomed in location. So a pretty prominent location across the street from the quarter and the church. I know that this project's been through this commission a couple of times. Next slide. So site history, this project and site had a lot of significant relationship and context. The transportation under the bridge was always a huge component. The ticket booth, there was a taller building of about 5 stories on the site originally, taller than the church. And then obviously the prominence of the bridge and the significance of the bridge directly adjacent to. Next slide. So just some existing context to what's going on in this part of the area of town. Currently, obviously, there's some beautiful historic buildings. There's also some newer construction across the street as well. And then obviously the unique street condition of the Superior Viaduct itself. The project obviously has a pretty unique site in regards to the amount of grade change that occurs from the front plaza, through the back end of the site. Next slide. So again, some existing conditions, a lot of overgrown vegetation. There is an existing what used to be the Cuyahoga County facilities and the ticket booth and access point to the underbridge, and then obviously a large surface parking lot as well. Next slide. Just to set some standards on some conditions that occur on this project, on this site. The parcel line is a pretty unique because it actually encompasses a portion of the right of way. It was never truly adjusted. There was obviously a street vacation and then a significant amount of easements at the perimeter of the site, and then a easement along the edge of the Detroit Avenue Bridge as well. And then there's a sewer easement that connected sewer from viaduct to the on the bridge area. Next slide. So I'm going to start with a lot of the placemaking that's going to occur from a street view of this project. We have a significant opportunity to hold the corner of Detroit and West 25th, creating a very nice entrance to the development off of that corner, create a very inviting sloped park and green space that would be activated with retail and restaurants, and create a really nice open green space and relief point to the site. So you can see some imagery here of some concepts that we are looking to introduce. The building will be slightly sunk into that corner. So we're going to have a plaza that will be tiered and sloped from the corner of West 25th and Detroit, and have you kind of come down into this plaza to create kind of a really unique and inviting green space. Next slide. And then some other building elements that'll occur. We've had a lot of discussion about greenery and landscaping in the air in regards to ensuring that there's not just the beautiful softness and green that will occur in the plaza area, but then also at the rooftops and roof terraces that can overflow. There's going to be a pretty significant roof terrace on the top of the building with great skyline views, and how that indoor-outdoor experience can happen on the building as well. You can see in the bottom right some of the kind of ornamental grasses that we feel could really create kind of a soft edge with the proposed building as well. Next slide. So from the project's perspective, some changes and adjustments from the last time you guys have seen this project. We're proposing a single building on the site. It'll be a 7-story structure. It'll be built as a 5/2 construction type. So it will be a lot lower than the previously proposed 16-story tower. But similar principles, we'd be maintaining the ticket booth and maintaining this kind of large entry plaza as you come from the corner of Detroit and West 25th down. The West Superior Viaduct and West 25th frontage will all be lined with retail and then retail facing plaza as well. And then we'll have 2 stories of parking on kind of the right side of this plan with the lobby in the middle, fully connected between the plaza and Superior Viaduct. The overall project is 145 apartment units. Those apartment units will range in size between 565 square feet to 1,205 square feet, and then 132 key Hilton Motto Hotel. So still have all of the mixed-use components and program, just in a different shape as it was previously presented and approved through landmarks. Next slide. So this is just the 2nd story. Again, it'll be all parking. Next slide. And then you get to the more typical floor plans from 3 to 6th floor. We'll have the hotel tower portion of the wing of the project facing West 25th on the forward section. You can see it in the aqua-toned shading. And then in the U shape of the building will be the apartment building stack, kind of towards the rear. So this is a look at the 3rd floor plan, which there are going to be some roof terraces at that level that will be non-occupied. But the green buffer that you're seeing there, it's intended to fill those areas in the green with edge planting, so that, as I mentioned, it softens the edge of the building as the building steps back as it goes higher. And you'll see that in the renderings here shortly. Next slide. And then lastly, the 7th floor plan will have a small restaurant, some amenity spaces shared between the hotel and the apartment building. And then lastly, a roof terrace that'll kind of be in that inner corner to overlook and oversee the skyline of Cleveland. Next slide. So we look at the materiality. When we got involved in this project, it was very important to us to have a modern sense, but pay homage and respect historic traditions. So we're looking at a predominantly masonry building with some soft, subtle green patinaed looking metal panel to create kind of a little bit of a softness to that masonry. Utilizing the masonry with some new detailing. So you can see in this image in the middle a lot of the texturing through the corbelling of the masonry, and then different techniques to address the window jambs in a soldier course or roll lock formations. And then lastly, the perforated panel of varied sizes. The intent is to do a gradient in an upward fashion. So the lowest panel per floor will be mostly opaque, and then it'll gradient to being more transparent as it goes up in that facade line at each floor line. So just some of the design inspirations and imagery that we're going to convey in the building. Next slide. So again, here's an overall perspective, view from the corner of West 25th and Detroit, looking back at the bridge of this new building. Again, 7-story structure, and then the materiality, as I mentioned, as we just went through on some of the inspiration images. Next slide. Next slide, same view there. Here's a great view of, our conceptual level of the plaza design. As I mentioned, there's kind of a sunken plaza. We're working to refining this and working through this, that we would like to have a lot more connectivity from the sloped floor area into kind of towards the retail space, so that it kind of cascades into this plaza instead of just being a slope direction to the entranceway. So there'll be kind of two movements as we continue to refine that edge and this condition. But the intent is to completely activate this space at streetscape, create opportunity for a lot of gathering and a lot of opportunity to enjoy the aspects. And you can also see the edge plantings, as we talked about, on the perimeter of the roof as well. Next slide. So here's a view just looking straight into, which is kind of the main pedestrian access way. The main access way with the vehicular will be off of Superior Viaduct. But you can start to see some of that detailing, the detailing around the windows and at the floor lines, and then the inset detailing of the soft patinaed metal panel. And then you can see a subtle cornice work detail. It says just slight slope at that upper floor, just to create a little bit of a crown, a little bit of an edge, but let it be a little bit understated. Next slide. Here's a great upward shot. You can see the detailing of that cornice work, but really what we wanted to emphasize in this is the detailing of the masonry conditions. So you see the expressed window jambs, the expressed corners of the movement and texture. We really wanted to allow this building in masonry to really provide some depth to the building as well. Next slide. So again, just a farther step back view, but it gives you kind of a full view of the building in length. You can see the midpoint where the underbridge connection occurs is where we have that other inset to the right at the midspan of the building to help break up, the length of run on the right side there. Next slide. So here's a view with the church in the foreground, and then also kind of a view down towards the storefronts along the Superior Viaduct, and then the porte cochere and hotel entrance and vehicular entrance to the building. Next slide. Here's a view coming down from the bridge, to this corner, so you can kind of see once you get past the existing buildings, the view of the building. Next slide. And a view of the streetscape walking down towards the porte cochere and towards Superior Viaduct, and the retail engagement at the street level. Next slide. And these next ones you can kind of just flip through, but they're overall views of the building, the massing, and detailing, just to give you a perspective of all four corners. So if you want to flip through probably the next 4 slides. It's a view back from Superior Viaduct. There's another view looking back up towards West 25th. View from the bridge. And then concepts landscape plan. We're planning on really softening the edges of the site with landscaping, usual principles of native species, low maintenance. We have a lot of tight growth plantings, so the canopies can stay in kind of a tight formation so that they don't block views and the activations of the storefronts. But again, a large emphasis on creating a really unique space, especially along the underbridge, ensuring that we have an inviting space as you can walk around as a pedestrian, and then the connection to that underbridge as well is maintained. Next slide, I think it's just sample plantings. So again, some color and low maintenance perennials that would be expected in the native Cleveland markets that do well with hardy growth and salts and all the things that you deal with in an urban context. But as I mentioned, a lot of the trees that we've selected for this are have a very tight canopy, again, to not obscure views and disrupt the activation of the plaza. Next slide. Might be it. I think the last 2 slides here are just some elevations to give you some sense of height and some of the context of adjacent buildings. Here's one more slide of those as well. So I'd love to open up any questions, comments to the commission here, and happy to address any questions or concerns.
Well, all right, I will just begin by saying I'm not opposed inherently to the massing of this, but this last page that you're showing with this long elevation seems not well articulated, that you've got a lot of mass here that just keeps going and going with repetitive punched openings in this, what seems to be heading to be a nicely articulated surface of brick textures and finishes. But I think the overall impression here, plus is a too much of a repetitive, unarticulated mass here, and then the metal panels up at the 7th floor going around. I know you haven't sloped them or anything, but it sort of looks like a modified mansard roof, which is does not appeal to me in the least, or feel like it belongs there, and that's accentuated by those arch top windows going around the 7th floor, which seem to have no grounding anywhere else in the building, like this was just stuck on the top. And so I find those 2 features troubling. I like what you're trying to do with the plaza and the siting of the building. One issue I have with the siting of the building is you created this plaza that slopes down to the lower level, but one of the comments that we had from the previous proposal, which was addressed as it went along, was that by coming up so close to West 25th Street on the what would be, I guess, the western edge, you pretty much totally screen off the view of St. Malachi's Church. It would be nice if that were held back just a little bit more to allow.
Daniel, can you go back to a forward slide here? Because that was an item that we very much heavily looked at, and what we are doing is we are aligning the faces. So we are holding it back further than what it used to be. It is creating what will create a BZA requirement because of the urban form overlay, because we are not engaging within 8 feet of the property line, which is what is a requirement of the site. But we felt it was really an important principle to maintain the sight lines of the church. So we are intentionally, holding this building back to align with that edge, so that we don't.
I'm glad you showed that, because that makes me feel more comfortable with that particular aspect.
I think, Doug, the other part is we're trying to, the arches on the 7th floor is more of a nod, not of the building, but of the bridge that it's along. So, when you look at the elements of the Detroit Superior Bridge and the arches along the former streetcar level, that was the inspiration for that. So you're trying to address, what it's meant to articulate is the, arches of the bridge and draw a connection with, those two.
All right, well, that helps me understand, how it came to be. But
And then I think the only other thing that's not well illustrated in these renders or drawings is the fact that you've got a system that I asked Brandon to talk a little bit more about at the Crown, that adds a little bit more depth and texture. And so I'll let him articulate that system of like the fins that go out.
Yeah, so we, as I mentioned in the presentation, we're kind of creating a crown to the building, but we wanted it to be, slightly understated. You can see it here in that soft line as it kind of, slopes in an outward fashion, to the sky, instead of, as you mentioned, a mansard that would slope inward, to that aspect. We also wanted the 7th floor to kind of have a feeling of kind of a softness, and break away from the architecture of the main building. We didn't want a 7-story masonry building in context, and I want to stress and emphasize the importance and significance of going from a 16-story tower to a 7-story building mass. And the intent is we obviously there's economics that play into the reason and rationale of making this change, but more importantly, I think to the context of the neighborhood and the district, a 7-story building fits much more within the context of this area than a 16-story tower ever did. And so because of that, you end up needing, a lot more mass to create that, because, you're not going vertical. So to maintain the same exact program, you have a much more linear building. And we tried to do that. If you go to the floor plan of a typical, we tried to create kind of a meandering form with some breaks along the way. There's the inset at that midpoint. We treat out all the corners with that textured detail to kind of, create some breaks, and then insets. But we could potentially look at maybe it needs some more breakup. Maybe there needs to be some more insets that occur as well. So, we broke the inset right at the connection to the hotel, to the apartment building, very intentionally, on that forward wing, to create kind of a separate feel from, the U shape to that hotel wing. But we could take a look and see what else might occur.
well, I think that would be useful. I think just to contrast with what's going across the street, for example, with I guess that whole thing is called the quarter. But anyway, if you look at that building for what is it, a 5-story building, has a lot of surface articulation in it to kind of break down the form. And I think this building design could use a little more of that. It doesn't have to be as extreme as that, of course, but yeah, there you go. In the bottom center photograph, that form is broken down. It's just not monolithic with the same detail going all the way around the form. And I think that's something
Yeah,
that design could benefit from in some way.
We'll take a look at that. I mean, we wanted to really stay away from that. If you see the two far left images that are actually on this screen, with the trust building here across catty corner to us, we felt that that was much more appropriate, in regards to it is with some subtle details, obviously, that are different, but you can start to see instead of the projected texture, it's a recessed texture that occurs with the masonry detailing. So we wanted to pay homage and respect to that, but in a more modern way with the expressed version, not the reveal, and then some of the detailing as well. So maybe what we need to look at is some more breakups to create that texture. But I would say that we would definitely want to stay away from the context of the quarter and go more in line with fitting in better with the building that's catty corner, that's historic to the district and to the area.
And Doug, I just also point of information that the quarter phase 2, you've been able to see both quarter phase 1, which is the bottom middle building, and then quarter phase 2, which is not in these images. Looking at them every day out our living room window, the phase 2, which is much more aligned with what direction we're going with Bridgeworks, is an enormously more handsome and elegant building than quarter phase 1.
Well, I guess I wouldn't necessarily argue with that point. However, I think my first impression of this is that the mass of your proposed building is visually and physically much larger than either the Forest City Bank building or what you see on the, because the quarter is not exposed. Your building is exposed pretty much on 3 sides. It becomes a major visual element on the streetscape. And so therefore, I think it needs some effort at breaking down that form just a little bit. So I'll shut up and leave it to other folks here.
The beauty of coming here at a conceptual phase, so we'll take a look at that, take that commentary, and see what we can do to integrate some of that commentary into the building.
I largely agree with Doug, entirely agree with Doug actually, on the monolithic nature of it. While I agree that 7 stories is more appropriate here than the 16 stories, the benefit of the 16 stories is that it broke up the massing of the building in a more interesting way. I'm not asking you to go back. That's not what I'm saying, but we've got to figure out a way to make this less monolithic. One of the ways is on the ends. You make it more detailing on the brick, like you see here on the trust building, the bank building there. Either end has a little differentiation, not a lot, but enough to make it visually interesting. And same with the corner. Speaking of the corner, we typically like our commercial corridors to hold the corner. I know that the prior iteration had a public space, a plaza there, and so does this one. But the key distinction between the prior renderings and this one is that this is sunken. And that adds a whole other dynamic to this. And I think it would be much better if it were the prior iteration at street level. Sunken public spaces.
Unfortunately, it's just not physically possible. So, the challenge at the site, there's an 11.5-foot grade change between the one corner to the other. So the average grade plane, comes out to being about 5.5 feet. And so, the economics of this building is a 7-story structure allows you to build as a 5/2, which needs to come in underneath 85 feet. So that's really the challenge with creating that plaza. It needs to be kind of pushed into the ground a little bit to accommodate that.
I don't have it in front of me. My recollection that was that the prior iteration was at street level, more or less.
It was sunken a little, because it definitely had stairs and some access ways. It may not be at 5.5 feet, but it may have been at like 3 or 3.5 feet around that. But we are definitely going to look at I'll call it creating a less hard-lined transition, into that plaza, and allow it to have a little bit more free-flowing than it currently is shown. Unfortunately, with at this early state, we just put a railing at the edge, and the intent is not to you know, it's really, you need to make sure that it's fully activated, not just a lower plinth, if you will.
Okay, well, I think that's a big element to this project, is how that plaza interacts with the corner. And it being sunken, I think lessens that impact. So I'll leave it at that. But one of the effects of the sunken plaza is that much of the parking garage on the second floor, while not at eye level, is much nearer to eye level. And it's becomes therefore a more prominent visual part of the building as a pedestrian or even as a driver. And I don't know whether it's ways of pushing the parking garage to the rear of the structure, like it was in the prior iteration, but having a screened parking garage where you can very clearly see into the cars, both at the 25th and Detroit, and as you alight and go up the bridge or come back from the bridge, that's what you're looking at. And if there's a way of making that garage not so prominent, I think that would also help go a long way with this building. A couple other items just to tick off my list here. We had previously approved a demolition of the building on site, and the demolition was approved, or at least my vote was conditioned on, when I approved it, elements of it being either reused or architectural nods to its existence being placed in what I thought was a coffee shop. I could not support the demolition of that building for a parking garage. So I don't know where that process is at, but I know the building's still there, and what made me support demolition, those elements no longer exist.
Yeah, and as we come back for kind of the certificate of appropriateness and final, we'll be working through those details. We're intending on reuse and integration of those materials 100%. We just have not fully gotten an understanding of quantity and kind of in a detailed level to be able to understand how much material we have to work with and how much material we can integrate with to accommodate that. But it's our full intention to have some of those detailing and aspects and allow some of those maybe detailings to provide a little bit more of a kind of an Art Deco nod to the structure, because that's what that building had a similar design for. So that's our mission kind of moving forward, is to progress the design of the plaza and then also integrate those details into the project.
Thank you. Just two more comments. The color, and maybe it's just the rendering that's on my screen, but the color green there, I don't think it quite works with the surroundings. I know there's a little bit of green on the quarter, but it's a fraction, 1/100th or 1/1000th of what it is here. And I think it's too much of it. I don't know if my fellow committee members will agree, but I'd like to revisit or see some other options other than that green. And then something that I comment on most projects, including one last time with West 45th, is the use of paneling to fill fenestration openings by the windows. I just don't see the need for it. I don't think it adds. I actually think it detracts from the building. Just fill that with brick. Don't add a panel there that's not the main material. Less is more in that instance. Keep the material more unified than adding those green panels throughout. And I think those are my main comments. Doug hit on my main one. The second one being the sunkenness. The third one being the color and the panels used by the windows. You may want to consider on the top floor there adding some sort of cornice element, since you're evoking. I know it's from the bridge, but it does evoke some sort of neoclassicism. A cornice might work well. It might play well with the modern elements. I really do like the detailing that you are currently showing on the brick. I love the detailing around the window frames. I think that's really nice. So those are my comments. I'll let others speak. Thank you.
Hi, so I want to start. I guess I really do like the detailing on the brick, similar to what Alex said. I kind of want to echo what he said about the green. I don't know if you introduce copper or like, I don't know if there are other options to kind of like break that up. It's a lot. I appreciate what Doug said about the quarter across the street. And then I took a look at the quarter too, and I'm like, they have some really strong kind of verticals in there, like where their windows are showing from like the second to the third floor. And then they have that massive like expansion joint across like just at the fourth floor. And so it's like really strong statement. And I'm looking at the building now. And I see the horizontals, and I see a lot of horizontals because of the large like bays for the windows. I just and it doesn't come across in the elevation. I agree with Doug that it needs something to break it up more. And I don't know if it's the building catacorner, like you were saying. There's some recesses with the brick. There's some precast banding that goes around the entire building, which I'm seeing here, but it kind of like fades a little bit. Um, I guess I had a couple thoughts. My initial gut reaction was a little more negative. I understand the issues that we're all kind of going through and the need to value engineer. But I don't think that this building responds to the park that's coming up across the street. I don't think it has any of the like interaction with the public, interaction with the community that the previous design had. And again, I know you had to kind of take up more of that space, but the courtyard they introduced was dynamic, and it was like pervious, like it was the wall. This building feels like a wall, and that building you could pass through from one side to the other. St. Malachi had views, there were openings, people could go through when they're going down the street to the condos, people could pass through when they're going, whether they're going to, was it St. Malachi for whatever reason, people could pass through. They're going down to the rehab down the street. I just think that version of this was more walkable. I take issue with the procession to the underside of the bridge. That the other thing that previous design did that allowed it to interact with the public was that it introduced a place for food trucks, which in this location at this spot with that park coming up across the street, the idea that there were food trucks like right across the street from it, I think is something that's sorely missed. And like I said, I really don't think there's a lot of attention to um, how this building interacts with the community. And there's a rendering, it is the rendering along Superior Viaduct. If you can go to that one. Um, Along the back, or well, I guess I don't know if it's the prime side. Keep going. That I think it's the aerial. Actually, I'm sorry. Keep going to the aerial that looks at that side. Maybe it's the next one. Yeah, this one. Yeah, this one bothers me a lot. I, used to go down to St. Malachi for whatever meetings or for, to see the work that they're doing with the homeless. And I'm looking at this view of this retail, this really fancy like retail right across the street from that, and I think that there's some connection missing to the people that are like living around here. um I don't know, that retail area again to me feels like a wall. I agree with Alex what he was saying about the parking being at like it's on the second level, so at some points it's like eye level. um this just doesn't do it for me. The last question I had just looking at the plan was, what was your plan for loading? It looks like it's that aisle that's maybe carved out underneath, like between those two. Yeah, that. Um, I couldn't figure out what was going there, and I know the previous plan seemed to have planned that out a little bit, kind of behind the food trucks, and I thought it was a very elegant solution. But if you go to the first floor plan, uh, can we go to the first, or yeah. Yeah, I don't see that happening here. I mean, I'm guessing for the retail, it's just coming in the front door and they park in front or whatever, and maybe there's a trash room, but I'm not seeing
We
the
have a,
plans for that.
yeah, we have some on-street loading area. You can see the box truck in that right
The
corner.
hatched. Okay. I mean, that's all I really got to say is just that I think you should pay a lot more attention to the procession to the underside of the bridge. That path looks like an alley. It just needs to be lit, but it looks kind of shady. And then you get to the far end where the bridge is, and there's just a parking deck. That's kind of, I, I just don't know if the spaces um, are that inviting yet. But I do understand the problems having to come with value engineering. This doesn't do it for me. That's all I got.
I'll jump in here. I can appreciate the efficiency requirements of a lot of the unit layouts and things having to drive some fenestration and the metal panel being used to mediate some of that order across the facade. The long facades in particular, I also think they would benefit from a little bit of relief. I don't think it needs to be a lot. I think whether it's brickwork relief or it's the addition of some additional full height metal panel. I actually think the patina color, is okay. I think actually the sheen of that is important to study. If it becomes a gloss, I think it's going to read very fake, and I think
It would be more of a, it would be more of a matte.
yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think that's important that it does read as close to a true patinaed copper as possible if it's going to be successful. One question I have on the metal panels, I think if those are going to stay, it needs to be, what they're doing on the facade. If they're just faux metal panels on, the face of sticks behind them, I don't think they're doing much for the facade. But if they're actual infill panels in front of windows, if they're mediating kind of a veiled approach to the building, I think they're far more integral to the facade and elevating that piece of it. So I think they're warranted if they're doing something for the facade. On the actual penthouse architecture piece of it, I think it's in between a penthouse and a mansard roof typology, and I think it's unsuccessful because it's not leaning into either one of them. I think the projection out leans more into, I believe it was Alex, leading towards, add some cornice work into it, and it might be more successful, which I agree with. But if it's leaning more into a mansard approach, I think it needs to go the opposite way. I think where it stands now, it's unsuccessful as an architectural representation of whatever that penthouse wants to be in terms of its language. And then I also wanted to ask about the screening of the garage. I think it feels like an afterthought the way it's reading across the facade now. And I wanted to ask what the plan is for that, if it just hasn't been studied yet, or what that's going to be in terms of how it hits the ground or hits the retail.
There'd be a masonry knee wall, which would be brick, and we'd be framing out, window, cased openings basically that would mimic the architecture from above. And then you can kind of see it here. They're done in a gradient fashion, so it's more opaque on the lower portion of the floor as it becomes, larger hole openings and, to the upper, just to create some vertical movement in that paneling.
Okay, so the gradiated perforation is mostly restricted to the garage screen?
Correct.
Okay. I think I would like to see that shown kind of in a more rendered view so that it's kind of easier to understand and how it would actually read on the building. I think it could be successful. It could also fail in terms of how it reads against some of the other architectural moves. But beyond that, I think the garage facade feels very detached from the building, and I think it needs to sync up a little bit more, whether it's the scale of the openings of the garage, something needs to marry up the two pieces and strata of the building so that it feels more holistic the way it hits the ground. That's all I got.
I just wanted to, react briefly to Phil's comment, and I think what we'll do for the next iteration is show a circulation plan, because I think that's something that had been presented previously that isn't relevant here, or is very relevant here, but isn't presented in this deck, because the pedestrian experience has been studied and designed around, and there's no departure in terms of from the program on the ground floor level in terms of the fluidity of that ground floor level, with the cafe. So we just need to do a better job of illustrating it and showing that circulation plan.
Anyone else have any feedback, or Graham, Brandon, do you guys feel like you've gotten enough feedback from the committee to kind of go forward from here?
I mean, the form is the form. The layout, of the form and program, is what it needs to be. So we'll take the feedback and try to integrate solutions that work well and address. I think the feedback was very constructive and appreciate that. The key here, right, was expressing the significant change in the building form. Going from a high rise to a low to mid rise structure, and the relationship of the program to accommodate that. Unfortunately, we can't build a parking garage, that's 6 stories high and concentrated on the site like it previously was. The parking garage needs to be more integrated. So we'll just work on integrating the facade in that garage in a little bit better fashion.
Yeah, I guess if anyone have anything else, or
yeah, I agree with my colleagues about the monolithic nature of the building, and I appreciate the brick detailing, but I think maybe leaning into some different patterning or ways that you can recess even just slightly to help break that up would be great. One note that I'll just raise that was not is that the arched window patterning on the top level seems to be a bit irregular. I would maybe study ways to make that more regularized with like the smaller sizes and then the larger sizes next to each other. I just think if you're going to highlight that, especially with the green at the top, that maybe it could be a bit more intentional.
great. All right, anyone else? Not seeing anyone. Hey, Graham, Brandon, anything else from you guys, or Brandon summed it up?
Thanks
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, gentlemen.
All
All right, as we move on to our next set of cases, which are OC 23-53 and OC 23-54, 2828 Clinton Avenue. I am going to hand over sharing responsibilities over to Jessica, as I have to unfortunately step out a little after 1 o'clock. So yeah, Jessica will be handling the slides from here on out. Also wanted to note that Mary Nucci has joined us, so she is present at the meeting at this point. So yeah, with that, we have Denver Brooker here from VOCON to show us the presentation, which should be up on our screens now.
All right, thank you. My name is Denver Brooker, principal with VOCON, here to present 2828 Clinton, a new multifamily development in Ohio City. We're representing TurnDev, our client, and the development team for this project. And on the phone with me today, I also have Crystal Knapik, my colleague and senior designer on the project. So we'll start through the slides next. We'll just start by orienting everyone to where the site is. We're 1 block south of Detroit Avenue, between Church to the north and Clinton to the south. between 28th to the east and 29th to the west. Next. A little bit of the immediate context in terms of the views. The top right, looking south on 29th, middle, looking east on Church, with Church and State development immediately north of our site, and the firehouse occupying the northwest corner of the block that this development will go in. Next. Kind of moving around the site, we're on the south side, upper right, Clinton Avenue looking east. There's an existing building there. Part of this project, I think that's the reason for the 2 case numbers, is to demolish the existing building on the site to make way for the development. Middle right, to the on Clinton, we have Banana Blossom Restaurant and Malachi House occupying the southeast corner of this block. Next. So images of the northeast corner. So we're looking south on 28th, west on Church, and then on Church, just looking at Church and State. I will point out the pedestrian way between the taller and more mid-rise sides of that building. We'll come back to that and the relationship of this building to that existing pedestrian way. Next. This is just a little closer. Next. This is the existing building that we're requesting to demolish, formerly occupied by the Vibrator Company as a commercial semi-industrial use, and is a temporary warehousing use for Saucy Brewery. Next. These are some additional images of the building inside and out. Next. And then pulling out a little bit in terms of the context to kind of set up what we've done and how we've proposed integrating this development into what we see as a very transitional site. In the immediate surrounds, there are a number of relatively large multifamily developments that have happened over the last 10 years. Those are identified here. In addition, there are buildings within this portion of the historic district that are also large apartment buildings or institutional scale buildings that are brick masonry that are very much integrated into a single family neighborhood. So it's kind of wide range of building types and scales, both historic and new. Next. And here we start to see how that's played out over a period of time. Upper left, that is not 45th Street looking south, it is Franklin looking at the Dexter. And then in the other 3 images, some more historic buildings of considerable scale, all on brick, and immediately next to single family homes. Next. And some images here, again, a mix of old and new with a newer development that, on Clinton at the upper right, and some other existing historic buildings, both residential in nature and some more historic warehouse type buildings that convey a certain kind of fenestration pattern and scale. Next. This is a quick overview of the zoning district that we're within, the site area there in the middle. We are in a local retail district with the ability to build 60 feet in height and 90 with appropriate setbacks. And in our case, we'll get into this, most of the building, or half of it, is just under 60 feet. The other half is just over 60 feet, but it does have setbacks that are compliant with the zoning requirements. Next. As we embark on these projects, we try to put together a key kind of design framework of things that we're trying to do. In this particular case with this transitional site, number one was to knit the project into the neighborhood, and two, to integrate the material palette with the neighborhood texture, and third, and equally important, focus on the pedestrian experience. So as we walk through this, we'll show how these three design principles played throughout all of our design and development decisions. Next. Big overview is an axonometric. So as we pointed out, this project occupies most of a block, and the two corners, the northwest and the southeast, are notches in that block that become part of the immediate context that we need to work with. So we knitted this and looked at it as two independent buildings that are interconnected between them. We'll see how that plays out in plan. The site in many ways told us to do that, and then the character to the north and east is a little bit different than the character to the south and west. And as we develop this and continue to play out the idea of it being two smaller buildings as a part of a single complex, their design approach, their material palette, the detailing differs between the two, and that's very intentional. Next. Next. There are two levels of parking. Just as a kind of big program element, there's 223 total parking spaces serving 212 apartments. What we see here, the dashed line at the perimeter representing the property line. This lower level basement is pulled in significantly from those property lines. And what it allowed us to do as we worked to knit this into the site is we eliminated and minimized shoring costs because we're staying far enough away from the street that we can lay back the site and minimize shoring, and also minimize any impact to the basements of the neighboring structures to the northwest and the southeast. Access to this parking level is off of Clinton to the south. And you'll see that in the next plan. Next. So this is the first floor. Just stay with parking as a topic. Everything in gray in the middle stacks immediately above the lower level parking. First floor parking is off of 28th to the right in the plan. Lower level parking off of Clinton that you see where it says ramp down next to Malachi House. That's the access to the parking. As we look to all the primary circulation on the site, we designed this to favor the east side of the site. Looking at 28th as a primary artery that gives you access to the shoreway. We saw that as probably one of the primary vehicular routes, whereas 29th, Church, and certainly everything west of 29th on Clinton, very pedestrian in nature. So we're purposefully pulling service and car traffic to the east. On the first floor also, immediately next to each of the parking entrances is a service entrance for the building with on-street move-in with an elevator and immediate access to each of the two buildings. And for we named these buildings as a way to talk about them as we were moving through. The development team may ultimately change those. But for now, the north building we're calling Hanover House. after the former historic name of West 28th Street, and Clinton House after Clinton Avenue, just as a way to discuss them. In the middle at the top, you see a blue-green color. That's representative of the lobby. And back to my earlier comment, that lobby is aligned with the pedestrian way between the two sides of Church and State, responding to that existing pedestrian piece of context and adding a focal point and an end to it, but then also offering a new kind of found space, if you will, that wraps around the firehouse. We're continuing to develop that as an amenity space for the residents of this community, of this apartment community. And we have a landscape space, kind of a little different, very much in keeping with interesting spaces that are found throughout Ohio City. At the perimeter of the site on the first floor, everything you see there in two shades of blue are representative of ground floor apartments. Each of those with their own exterior entrance and small stoop, evoking a more residential townhome-like character. And as you start to see the renderings later, Clinton House definitely evoking more of a townhouse character, and Hanover House taking a more contemporary approach to that idea. But again, the thought is to build upon the pedestrian nature of the site and the full perimeter, save the two vehicular entrance and service areas being activated with people living there with ground level stoops raised approximately 18 inches to 2 feet above grade. Next. This is the second floor, and this is where the two sides come together with a second floor amenities terrace with pool above the parking deck. What you see there in purple in the middle is representative of the amenity spaces for the development with a community room, conference area, multi-purpose room, and fitness. Everything else, this level are apartments. All of the second floor apartments facing the terrace have their own private outdoor spaces. Next. And as we move up through the building, this is the third floor, and the fourth floor is mostly similar to this. There are some additional setbacks. We'll get to the next floor plan. As we move up the building, next. As we move up the building on Clinton House, the bottom building, there are some setbacks that we'll see in the renderings. And then moving on up. Next. And then the last floor plan, the sixth floor of Hanover House. So Hanover House being 6 stories, Clinton House being 5. There are setbacks along the north and east sides of Hanover House. You'll see how that plays out in the renderings. Next. This drawing documents some setbacks that we've allocated. A few things of note here. Along the whole perimeter of the building is set back at least 5 feet from the property line. That gave us the ability to create those private stoops and a zone of landscaping that you'll see in the renderings between the public sidewalk and the face of the building. The metrics at the upper left, the site area, those numbers are not right. And I just want to correct that for the record right now. The site area is 1.68 acres. And the building area for purposes of zoning is 175,455 square feet. That does not include parking, circulation, or building services. There are 212 units, and there are 223 parking spaces. Next. This next series of drawings and the renderings will be more helpful to describe the design. These were in here just simply to speak to the overall heights of each of the buildings. and the associated setbacks. We can just move through these quickly. So next, and next. Next. Ohio City and this landmarks district in particular, there's a wide range of design expressions, both historic and new on historic. And it's that blend of styles and textures and art and form that give this neighborhood the vibrancy and character that it has. And as we developed the building, we looked at that range, that diversity, and tried to incorporate it in our building and be very thoughtful about how each component could enhance and build upon the character that is already here, both new and old. Next. This is a snapshot, kind of a little palette, if you will, with Clinton House to the left and Hanover House to the right. Tension in both cases is a fairly warm palette. And with Clinton House, a more historically based design approach, not slavish to it, but referential in a way. And Hanover House being more contemporary, just a little bit edgier, but still being very sensitive to the pedestrian scale and staying with a fairly muted palette. Next. This is a view looking south between the two halves of Church and State. We're looking at the main entrance to the development with that lifted kind of cut into the building that forms a porch and entrance to the development, and opens up, widens the space between the building and the firehouse next door. So the porch and the space between the buildings start to become one. You can see that the 6th floor is set back, as we discussed earlier, and you're also seeing first notion of how the materials go together, with the lighter color being brick and the dark gray blue a metal panel with a kind of standing seam or ribbed approach. Next. As we move closer, we can see how this entry porch is cut into the 1st and 2nd floor of the building. We've introduced an accent of a synthetic wood material that shows up rather discreetly at the corners and entrance components like this, and how the porch starts to expand the space between the two buildings at this point. And looking to the left, you're starting to see in the distance, as you will on the next slide, the beginning of the stoops and entrances to the ground level residential units. Next. So this is, we're on Church looking east. So we have these paired 1st floor entrances to the apartments, coupled with balconies to the units on the 2nd floor, creating this ensemble that modulates along the length of the building, adding to the pedestrian scale and activity at the pedestrian level by having these open space elements. Also notice that on this side of the building and on the east, that the facade from the 2nd through the 5th floors undulates. It's an angled in and out kind of butterflying of the wall, very subtle, but adds an unexpected dimension to the length of the building. Next. And then this is Church looking west in context with Church and State to the right. Our building, Hanover House, is 6 floors, as is the lower portion of Church and State. The 6 floors in this building are slightly shorter than Church and State, because we don't have a higher first floor retail level. Next. This is the corner of 28th and Clinton. And again, we're looking at this, we're just seeing how there's continuity around the corner in terms of the brick base and the stoops and the undulating wall. Next. And then at the southeast end of this building on 28th, we're looking north now. And to the left in the image, we're seeing the east face of Malachi House. Next. And then a complete shift. We're now at the southwest corner of the site. This is Clinton House. And as I introduced earlier, intention is that this is completely different. And it is mostly masonry in this case, and a modulation of the length of the building on 29th and Clinton with these vertical components that are more evocative of townhouses or brownstones. And then the recessed spaces between each of those masonry components in a soft zinc colored metal panel that then is replayed and the setbacks at the 4th and 5th floors of the building. You'll note here at the corner of Clinton and 29th that the brick mass is 3 stories and then sets back significantly for a 4th floor terrace. The same occurs if you look to the left in the page next to the firehouse. So we're paying deference to the immediate context in terms of the heights of the corners and how we've handled the setbacks. Next. This is on Clinton at the east end of the building. We're seeing the vehicular entrance to the lower level of the garage. Noting the 5th floor setback that is along the entire structure at the Clinton and 29th side, and immediately to the right, the Malachi House. And we'll have some images later, but part of the development team worked with Malachi House in providing something that they didn't have that they needed and would like. We've set the building back enough to allow for a green space on the west and north sides of Malachi House, that while on this property, they will be developed for the exclusive use of Malachi House. And built into that program is the ability to add a accessible ramp to the 1st floor of the building. Next. Now we're at the northwest end, next to the firehouse. You can see the green space between the 2 buildings, beginning conceptual notion of landscaping and active space, and the setback at the 4th floor with that brick mass being of a similar height to the fire station immediately next to it. Next. And a little closer up to this to understand the pedestrian experience with the public sidewalk, the 5-foot minimum landscape buffer, and the small stoops, some varying designs depending on where we are along the length for each of the ground floor units. We're maintaining the existing public sidewalk dimension and the existing tree lawn dimension around the entire perimeter of the site. Next. This is on Clinton at the corner unit at 29th, slightly different entrance as we navigate the slight grade changes as you move around the building. Next. And then this is the space between the development and the north side of Malachi House. The intention of developing a fairly lush landscaped buffer to the 1st floor parking area and an outdoor space exclusive to Malachi House. Next. And then these views, while not immediately visible from the street, this is of the second floor amenities terrace, looking at the north face of Clinton House. And then the next image, next. Just kind of moving around, we're looking due west with Hanover House to the right. Next. I believe this is the last image, so a bit of an aerial view looking to Hanover House to the northeast. I think this is the last image. There's a lot there. Happy to answer any questions or discuss our design intentions and how this has been developed. Really appreciate this opportunity to present this.
Well, thank you, Denver. I think that my initial thought is that this very difficult site, we clearly spent a lot of effort in trying to relate to the different parts of the site, and particularly, I think your efforts on the Clinton building to modify the volume of the facade with sensitive setbacks and so forth to, break down the scale of this building as it transitions across West 29th to, more single-family residential. I think, by taking this 5-story building and relieving the facade by those setbacks has gone a long way. I think that on the Hanover building, I like the way you've articulated the entrance there by, taking a bite out of the corner of the second floor to really identify the entrance, and the way you've oriented it to the open space, the church and state across the street. I think that's good. I have some questions about your exterior materials, in terms of detail, but I know this is a conceptual presentation, so I think it's going in a good direction. I would say. I think that I was a little worried about the 6 stories of that volume of the Hanover building, but based on my initial feelings from your presentation, I also think that's going in a good direction, as opposed to the previous project we reviewed. You have, broken down the mass of this building in a couple of interesting ways, having some setbacks, creating those angular planar differences as you go across the facade, keeps it from feeling quite so monolithic. I appreciate that to a large degree. I have a question about the units that in the Clinton building, the ground floor units that have their own exterior entrances. Are those 1-story units or are those 2-story units? In other words, is that whole unit on that floor just the first floor, or are those?
They are single-story units.
Okay. Well, I guess my concern about that is, we have seen development in the last, 10 years of a number of projects that have these entrances right off the street like that. And I guess if I were thinking of living there, I'm thinking, geez, my bedroom window is about 6 feet off of the sidewalk. I'm going to have to keep my blinds closed all the time unless I want to really interact with the neighborhood on that level. I wonder what consideration you all gave to that in the design process and so forth. Any problems with marketability of that kind of unit?
No, not at all, actually, because one, there aren't that many of them. And for some pet owners, having a ground floor unit and immediate access to outside is actually a bonus. We've also, in working with how deep we excavated for the basement and the level we set the first floor at, and then using kind of ramp between the firehouse and our entrance, we're able to elevate that first floor. Again, 18 to 20 inches. It varies because the grade on Church is not the same as it is on Clinton. It looks flat, but it's not exactly flat. So that first floor is not at sidewalk level, it's set up. And so the window sills in turn are set up a little bit, so you have some sense of privacy. And that was also part of the 5-foot landscape setback. It's not right on the street. Yes, it's close, but there is some urban-minded elements that we've added to that. And again, pet owners, these will be considered a bonus.
Yes, I can see that perspective, but it seems to me that since I appreciate that you've got this extra setback there, but I think the landscape elements that you're going to install there become much more of a significant feature in how that space really works for, the tenants' interaction with the community at large and so forth. Now, the other question I have about those units is, it looks like, is there a direct connection out the rear of those units to the parking garage, or do they have to go outside and walk around to get into it?
No, each of those units will have a direct access to the parking area. And as in most buildings like this, parking spaces get assigned. So there's an opportunity that is the developers and building management lease this. Someone could park immediately next to the entrance to their unit, which is again also a big bonus feature to these ground floor units.
Great. Let me just add that I think that it's terrific that you have negotiated with Malachi House to provide that outdoor landscape space. I know that will be greatly appreciated by them, and so I applaud you for trying to accommodate that. So I will leave it to my colleagues to add more comments.
Thanks, Doug. Jessica, could we go to slide 34? Well, it's 34 of PDF page. Denver, I agree with Doug. I think you're more than 85%, maybe even 90% the way there. I'll start with my largest comments and then work. Did I just lose? Sorry, my computer just blacked out for a second. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The largest one is on this Clinton side. Would it be possible to reduce this building by 1 floor and add it to what you're calling the Hanover side? Increase the scale over on Church as it's opposite Church and State with that 12 or so story building, and reduce the scale as it's in the historic single family neighborhood area?
We've looked at so many iterations of this building in terms of the massing, and we're here in part because of construction considerations. If we add another floor to Hanover House, we change its construction type, and then that takes it into a different cost consideration. So we opted to develop this 6- and 5-story mass, and as you can see with Clinton House, more significant setbacks here on Hanover House because we thought that was appropriate, and we could still get the desired total leasable area, numbers of units, everything else that our client needed to make this work. But we did look at that, and in balancing all the considerations, we needed to go this route of construction.
Okay. I understand that. I think it would still look probably better if it weren't is a compromise here. When you look at the corner, could that 2-story more contemporary setback be reduced to 1 story so that it doesn't compete in massing with the more historic minded lower 3 stories?
I don't know the answer to that right now. I understand your line of questioning, and I guess I'm just going to reiterate that we really believe that we've done a good job of developing the massing for this and being responsive to the immediate context.
I agree with you, Denver. I'm just trying to tweak it to make it 1 notch even better.
Yes, I would agree with that. I would add that you didn't tell us. Do you know offhand, Denver, what that setback is between the 3rd floor and the 4th and 5th area back there? And you said substantial, but you didn't say how much. It would be helpful to know more precisely what that setback is.
I should know, and Crystal, if you're listening still, maybe you have available. I think it's 12 feet, but I can't make that record right now, but that is a dimension I can get you or have on the next submission.
Well, I think that's useful in evaluating this instead of just the rendering, to have a physical dimension. At 12 feet to me sounds pretty substantial. So if that's in the neighborhood of being correct, I feel better about it. Not just 5 feet or something like that, you know what I mean?
And then the other one is to bring the building line in line with the Ohio City Firehouse, the setback line. So most of the buildings, even multifamily on Clinton, have a rather substantial setback. I'm thinking of Clinton West, the apartment building there has a bit of a front lawn. I don't think it needs to go to that extreme amount, but to bring it in line with the firehouse setback, I think would be appropriate here.
Dan, can you
And I don't think it would be that much.
ground floor plan? Yeah, I think we're very close to being there already.
Yeah, if it's possible, Denver, I think it would add a lot to make it the same plane as the firehouse.
We will look at that. I'm pausing only because I know that the dimensions and getting the parking to work, and we were basically using the transition space between the firehouse and our building as a mediator for that slight offset. We thought that that did a nice job of, I mean, if they were tight to each other, I would completely agree. Here with that large space between, we were hoping, or we believe that it's a good transition. We can look at it, but it's a little tricky.
Okay. I appreciate it. Those are my two really big ticket items. I think the rest of them are things that can be more easily and readily accommodated. Jessica, if we go back to slide 34. Perfect, thank you. I have a strong preference to picking a more timeless brick color, something in the red family. You have the firehouse, you have the transformer station, the other brick buildings on Clinton, a stone's throw from this, the building immediately to the south of it. They're all in the red family. And I think that would help make this building fit in a little bit better. And I can't tell from the renderings if the brick has sort of a rough face to it or if that's just how the rendering looks. But we can worry about those details down the road. But I think altering the brick color would go a long way.
And we are still in the process of really tuning what the brick is. What we know at this point is that we believe that it should be a blend. A brick isn't singular in its color, but it's got a kind of softly mottled effect or flashing in it. We believe that the brick shouldn't be a super crisp brick, that to maybe have slightly irregular edges. Color is something that we've gone back and forth, and we have tested this in red. I will say that this building, red amplifies its scale. Lighter colors or warmer, earthier tones tend to make it less heavy. And even in spite of the size of these windows, when you test it in a red brick, the color of the firehouse, the whole thing becomes a little ponderous, too heavy. So that's, again, one of the considerations that we looked at as we continue to hone in on the precise color.
Okay. Well, I'd love to take a look at it in a red hue. I don't know how. I don't think that would be too difficult to just under renderings there, but if it's possible. And then on this building in particular, the one right at the corner, And I do like, by the way, how it's different from the last project we had. I do like the massing of it. I think it works well. Would you consider, instead of the windows that you're showing there, double hung windows, at least for that corner unit, if not all the way down on the 29th and Clinton facades?
And I understand your point of reference, and this is where historic nod, there's a balancing effect. We're looking at the brick material, the detailing, the regular punched windows, the cornice treatment as key elements that we pulled from that we think need to be there. And once you go down the route of double hung windows mixed with more contemporary windows, it starts to become a little muddled in terms of its language. And I understand where you're coming from in terms of the historic homes having that, but we think, well, we believe that if we try to absolutely replicate all the historic details, it will fall short. So our intention is to create something that stands on its own, that is still sensitive to context. So I prefer, believe that it's better out mixed window type, but continue to maintain these regular rhythm of punched windows.
Okay. I mean, I hear you, but I hear your point, Denver. I think it's a fair
It's a
one.
tricky balance. I respect your comment, and it's just that I feel like we've picked the right historic things to refer to so that when this is done, it doesn't feel like we were trying to be historic and failed, or we were trying to be modern and it's not so good. It's been a careful development of an architectural language that's used consistently.
My last and final, I think for right now anyways, substantive comment is to reconsider the placement of the garage door on Clinton and to move it over to Church, where there's already a curb cut and garage door, and not to add another curb cut to Clinton. We try to be sensitive to that. And if it's possible, looking from your site plan, I think it might be, but I'm not an expert on that. If it's possible to move it over to Church.
Can we go to that? There we go.
Rather than have the ramp there on Clinton, put the ramp on north of it on Church. Just something to play around with.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear you, and I know why you're saying that. It's just that it's a little tricky because what it then does is it bifurcates the ability to have pedestrian continuity of pedestrian apartments on that northeast corner continuous. Suddenly there's a vehicular break in the first floor apartments as it's designed right now. Both sides, the entry doesn't bifurcate that street experience along all these new residential entrances.
Right. Well, as Church is now thoroughly commercialized, I think having it there rather than on the residential street would be a strong policy preference.
I think my initial reaction is I would disagree with that, that I think Church has become too commercialized, and by introducing a full strip of residential along that helps balance it out. I think I don't even like driving down that block of Church anymore because it's so often full of trucks and so forth. I think by removing the vehicular access to this project down to Clinton, I think helps may help balance the traffic considerations. Because when I first looked at this, I started thinking about that too. I said, "Gosh, what if we consolidated all the vehicular access to church up there?" And then I started thinking, well, what do I like or not like about that? And I don't like the idea of church becoming even more vehicular than it has become since the advent of church at state.
Okay, those are my number one. If I had to pick one of all of them, Denver, it would be brick color. I don't know why it reads Crocker Park or Legacy Village to me, but I understand it, and I know that you've weighed it, and that means a lot, and I appreciate that. If we go more timeless, I think that would be my preference. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say this is a dramatic improvement over the previous project. I think you guys have done a wonderful job. My favorite parts are how you, I think it's a Hanover building, how you're navigating the change in scale along the street. I think that's a wonderful break between that first floor and like the blue above. I like the porches, I like the plantings. Alex had a couple of good points. I think one I was regarding the firehouse and where that line is, and I was wondering if there's the ability to navigate it by putting that. I see like there's an inset on the two-bedroom. I'm wondering if that inset was like on the corner. You could start to like negotiate between the firehouse and the line of your building. Um, just to kind of have another step happening there. Um, was one thought I had, but again, I understand the issues and the sizes of things and parking and all the other thing. But I think it might be helpful to navigate that transition to a different a different sort of line of buildings. Um, I really like I actually kind of like the brick. I like that on the Clinton building, it's kind of the main sort of feature, and on the Hanover, it's insets and it kind of accents everything. I believe it's the same brick on both buildings, the same brick color.
We've shown it as slightly different, and that's an evolution as well. Early in the project, we thought that we'd use the same brick on both, but maybe to continue to play up the distinction between the two buildings, we're thinking that we may select two distinct bricks.
I would urge you to have them be the same. I like what it does. I like how you're using it in two completely different ways. So that would that would be my little input on that. My other favorite part is the space that you've negotiated with the Malachi House. I would hope that, this building under different ownership that just never goes away and is always maintained. I think that's wonderful. But I think that is that ramp then that Alex mentioned, that it's kind of the worst part about being over there is that cars are going to be entering in that space, and then right next door is, kind of this outdoor seating area. So I don't know that it necessarily needs to go in church, but if there were other opportunities or other places, that would make that area by the Malachi House just all about people.
And just to clarify, that's not an open ramp, so there's an overhead door.
Yep.
And so that's essentially a solid wall as a backdrop to that outdoor space. So it's not like you're seeing or hearing the cars. They're physically blocked off.
Oh, for sure. But I think there is something to that. There's still cars kind of happening right there. But
I couldn't make them go away.
if there's another place for it, I'm sure you guys have done the studies or are gonna continue to be diligent. I actually love the way everything is kind of played out for this design. Is such a relief. I guess the only thing that I felt was missing was on the Clinton building. Um, I I really like the way that the Hanover negotiates that, like change of scale on the first floor, and I appreciate all the detailing in the brick on the Clinton building. I think some of that is lost a little bit. I think it kind of plays out that there's just kind of large masses. I like the way they've been broken up, but there's just kind of large masses along the street. And if there's anything that could happen between the first and second floor, um, I think that could be a wonderful addition. Um,
Could we bring up that view from Clinton and 29th?
yeah, there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think there's some large masses on the first floor, and it sort of reads like townhomes on the 3-story section, but I think when it gets to 4 stories, it's just they're kind of big and imposing on the street.
Well,
But
maybe there's an additional band of brick detailing at the first floor. Can be something subtle that just adds another layer of detailing. We can look at
absolutely, absolutely. Um, yeah, I think that's what I got. Thank you. Thank you for agreeing to take a look at that.
I'll jump in here next. I can say on this slide actually. So the Clinton house to me, I think is very appropriate in scale. I actually like the setback of the top floor and then this corner being the floor below it. I don't mind that scale. I think it in material and form and language, I actually think it resolves itself very, very well. I don't mind the brick at all. I think the way that it syncs up with the metal tones, I think is very, very handsome. I also don't mind the setback being slightly proud of the firehouse, mostly because I think it allows, because of the breathing room that that firehouse has on both the south and the east side, I think it allows that to become an object on the corner, and it kind of means that it doesn't necessarily have to be apples to apples aligned with the Clinton house and that west elevation. And because it's not necessarily the same brick, I think it just reinforces that it's a separate object. So to me, it doesn't matter that it's not quite aligned. I do think that that addition of banding at the top of the first floor would do a lot to just push these 4 height window bays just to the next level to make them really, really handsome. My issue is actually with the opposite corner rendering, if we could go to that. Yeah, this will work. So to me, the scale of the formal move of the undulating facade is a little bit too heroic in that it almost detaches itself from a residential building, because to me, there's not enough to reaffirm this as a residential building. It feels almost like the back elevation of a residential building instead of the front facing one. I think it just needs something else to reassert itself being residential in scale on those 2nd through 5th floors. And I don't know what that is. I just think it needs something more to bring down the scale of that long linear facade that maybe is a little bit smaller to supplement and support this larger gesture that I think is successful, but I think it's too large of a move in and of itself without something else to also contribute to it not feeling so large a gesture. Other than that, I think it's very well done and a beautiful project.
And just in response to your last comment, it is an interesting one. And one of our points of reference as we looked at this building is if you think about in the immediate context, particularly on Detroit, there are a few warehouse scaled large brick buildings, maybe not this many stories, but similar scale with large, regularly spaced punched windows. So in terms of texture of, scale, regular large punched windows, in some ways it's referential to that. And that was, again, playing up, heightening the difference between this building and Clinton House was one of our driving design considerations. And I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it's reinforcing the datum of the breaks in the vertical ribs. Maybe they just aren't reading as much as they need to in this.
That's It's a valid point because it is something that we've noticed because we want this color as we hone in on it to be dark and muted. We don't want it to scream blue. We just want it to be distinct, and that particular color kind of in some ways makes the folds disappear a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and my concern is just this perception from the street level as a pedestrian. I mean, it's going to be tall. Does it also feel tall, or is there a way to bring that down so that it still is, welcoming as a residential scale building when you, as a perception, as the way it reads architecturally?
Just to respond to your comment, Philip, what I think of one thing is maybe if that south wall, as it returns around to 29th Street to those balconies, what if that became brick to sort of anchor the end of the building and help make a transition, although there's a big space between that and the Clinton building. If that sort of end panel, if you will, became brick from the other building, which is also fairly neutral, so I think it might correspond well to the metal panels, but instead of the metal box, you've anchored the end of it in brick.
And what we did do, and it doesn't show up in this view, but the brick does wrap that south end is broken up into two kind of planes that you see there that are in blue, and between them, the brick does wrap up. So we were trying to mitigate the overall the width of the south end of the building. So it's actually in three planes separated by a transition.
Okay, I'm glad you pointed that out. I didn't notice that right away.
I'll go next if that is okay with everybody. I agree largely with Chris's comments. I think I think the massing looks pretty great. I think the material you're proposing is interesting and contextual. And while I can appreciate Alex's comments on like the double hung window, Denver, I also understand and tend to agree with your interpretation of, differentiating it using a more modern style window, because you are respecting a lot of historical elements and materials in the overall facade approach. I'm going to focus, I think, a bit more on the engagement with the neighborhood on the pedestrian level. I could go here or there in terms of the parking entrance locations. I can see where you put them where you did. I think there also might be an argument that putting the garage on Church will give a little bit of break to Malachi Center's private area, which also applauds so much. I think that's really awesome. I think when we get to the firehouse side and where it starts to engage with the firehouse, if we can go to the slides that show that more, both on 29th and on Church, like basically like the pieces that kind of anchor around. Yes. I would love, I think there needs to be a functional focus on how the firehouse and the businesses in the firehouse are actually using the space immediately surrounding the building and the parts that are on their property, because I think we have like a little bit of rendering Photoshop magic happening, which love to see it from a dreaming standpoint, but I think I would love to see this design really consider the functional meeting of that building and what those business owners are using the building perimeter as well as how we can then really create what's happening in this rendering, which is a really interesting and engaging kind of public little alley sweep around the building, because I think that would also be really great if it could become this feeling that you're showing here. And maybe that means it's kind of like if you go to a plan view, Dan, or is Jessica, are you driving now? I think, yep, that's perfect. If we look at this kind of like where the entry plaza is, as well as the entrance from 29th, it looks like different levels are happening. I don't know if it's maybe that it stays one level so it becomes a lot more usable space, or is there an opportunity to pull that lobby footprint in a little more to give a little bit more space to that entry plaza to further kind of connect and engage that wrapping? I think it could be really special moment. And in the same vein of thought, was there any retail considered in this project? Because you are straddling kind of this, I love the walk up. I think the residential pieces of this project are very compelling and I'm happy to see them, but I'm wondering if there is a little missing piece of retail or if that would help make that kind of plaza be a bit more public feeling. If that is the intention, is there a retail moment that also then pulls people in to help, again, kind of engage? This project's offering a lot to its own residents, but what is it offering to like the rest of the neighborhood who don't live there? So I think that's kind of inclusive of my really just focusing in on that kind of engagement and public engagement piece of the design at the ground level.
And I can answer a few of your questions. One, we are navigating levels because we've pulled the whole first floor above grade. And so to access the front door of the lobby, we need steps and a ramp. And we're working to navigate that from both 29th and Church. So a pedestrian walking either way could get up to that lobby entrance. And it is relatively modest interstitial space that we've been, admittedly, this is still a concept, working with the development team in terms of, is this outdoor space that is private to the residents, that is an extension of the lobby? They're a little nervous about making it public. That was our original design intention. They're just concerned about safety. It's a, you can light it, but it's a kind of a closed space. Is there a reason that could be unsafe? So those are all considerations that we've been working through. In any event, I think that the scale of space is just going to be interesting by virtue of its dimension and the fact that it's daylit on both ends. The development team very seriously considered retail, and we had it in, we had it out, we had it in, we had it out. And we're presenting it here this way as kind of the final outcome of their analysis. They looked at the district. They actually talked to a number of potential tenants that were kind of interested. But then they looked to Church and State and to the Dexter, where there's retail space in the immediate neighborhood that still is not leased. And in terms of looking at it for this building, no matter how small, it just didn't seem to make sense in that context. And that's why we have only ground floor retail or ground floor residential and no retail.
Thank you so much for the explanation. I think I can see yes, I feel like that alley moment could feel unsafe because it feels like a little narrow alley at the moment. I think if you wanted to, I would encourage them a lot to explore the idea of keeping it public, and then that way pushing perhaps the edges of those lobby pieces in if they can, to give more width to that, so it feels it starts to hold presence and not be a dark, narrow space. You can also explore, like Jukebox, our little block across the street, does that so successfully, and they just simply mitigate it with a gate, and maybe that's something that we can use, that sort of, maybe there's a barrier of sorts that can be utilized. And I also think if they do want to reconsider retail, very much hear and appreciate the reasons not to, is to look again at that block and see that these little teeny tiny retail spaces are very much rented and taken up. So maybe it's a micro situation. Again, I don't think, I would love to see further development of that. Nothing is a hard requirement from me. It's more just trying to keep this from keep it from feeling like it could be somewhere else. I want it to feel like it's part of this very, very open retail residential blurred line in this chunk of a neighborhood.
Agreed. And in the next presentation, we'll definitely have developed imagery for this space, similar to what we did for Malachi House.
Great, thank you.
All right, I'll just interject here that in the interest of time, unless a couple of people on the committee who have not spoken yet have any other new comments that they'd like to throw on, if it seems like we've covered this pretty thoroughly and we still have one more item to review when we've exceeded our standard time limit. Is everybody else okay with wrapping this up?
Yes.
Well, I greatly appreciate all of your time and the comments. We look forward to the next presentation.
All right, thank you, Denver.
Okay, everyone, now it's my turn. Obviously recusing, project involving my personal home that I share with my husband, Jason. A couple of years ago, unfortunately, his father passed away, and his mother would like to live in an ADU apartment above our garage. And so the proposal here today is an ADU above an existing garage. So if you see here on the site plan, Wheat Court runs to the north of Clinton Avenue. 33rd is an alleyway immediately to the east. Right now, our garage doors enter off of West 33rd. Part of this proposal would to be move the garage doors onto Wheat Court, which is in line with all the other garages on Wheat Court. What you see there on the screen, the garage is there, and then our proposed addition would be to extend it roughly 15 feet to the east and about 4 feet to the west, and you'll see why in a moment. So the entire proposal just has to do with our garage in addition. If we can go to the next slide. And if anyone has questions, stop. So there where you see the two cars is roughly the outline of the existing garage, and the 15 feet to the towards the bottom of the screen there, which goes to the east, would be added to give additional room for the apartment above it. And then the stairway is roughly the dimensions of the expansion to the west. On the first floor there, you have what will be an additional room for the garden and for the pool. And then above it on the second floor is a single unit apartment for a true mother-in-law suite. We can go to the next slide. All right. The bottom drawing there with the two garage doors, that is what will be facing the public right away. That will be Wheat Court. Again, the garage is there. It would be added to the second floor, is what the addition is, in with the roof. And then you have to the right of the garage door one is what would be, I believe, sorry, to the, is the one facing to the west. You see the dimensions there, or the elevations there. And then the east elevation would also be public, facing just the wall, not the pediment. And then the top image there is what would be seen from our garden. As you saw from the site plan, our yard is fenced in and surrounded by a row of English horn beams, so most of that will be screened. If you go to the next image, and these are, I believe, renderings from what it would look like from, this is Wheat Court, this is West 33rd. Our house is immediately to the left. You'll see the garage. All of the materials for the addition are the materials that are already on the garage or already on the house itself that were approved back in 2012 when we built our house. The materials are all hardy board. The windows are all aluminum clad Pella Architect series windows. And the roof for the garage will be a standing seam black metal roof. If you go to the next image, that's from the public right away. We were asked to provide images of this intersection. This is where two alleys meet in the back, 33rd and Wheat. As you can see, the garage door there is in line with the garage door immediately to the right in that image to the west. Those hydrangeas, that's not infill, those are already there. They would remain there, and we would plant 2 additional trees on either side of the garage door. And those windows are, again, aluminum clad wood windows, Pella Architect series, actual Muttons double hung windows. Next image. Again, from the alley immediately to the north of us is Kowalski Heat Treating, so it's a bit of an industrial site. And then you also have the surface parking lot for Edge 32. It's a unfortunate looking alleyway. We're hoping our plantings in addition will improve that. You go to the next one. And then this is our private view. This is would be our garden view. Again, the first floor is there. The arches for the espalier are already in place. It would just be the 15 feet to the right in this image and adding a second floor. that's the presentation.
Well, this looks like a very sensitive addition, modification. What is, I can't quite read on these, what is the proposed pitch on the new roof?
That's a very good question, Doug. I don't know the exact.
But it looks appropriate.
I will get that answer to you.
Okay. Then I don't quite follow the, could you explain a little bit more about the balcony?
Sure.
Facing the yard. I see on the two side elevations like a simple railing, and then I see on the, is it the south elevation?
No,
what looks like.
there's no railing. What you're looking at is the profile of the roof pitch on the portico there.
Oh, it's not a balcony. It's
No, that's not a balcony. Nope.
Just the roofing. All right, got it.
If you go to the floor plan, I think, which is up one, yeah, right there. So you see the room there will be like a garden room, a pool house room, whatever you want to call it, on the ground floor, which has the pediment in front of it. And then the second floor is just a standalone apartment.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yep.
Did you include you didn't include an existing conditions plan or any existing conditions photos?
No, Jessica, would it be okay to go to Google Earth or Street View?
So the street view is what's there right now.
Yes, correct.
Okay. With the brown garage. Okay.
Yep. So again, it's the existing garage. We expand roughly 15 feet to the 33rd side, roughly 4 or 5 feet on the other side, and then add a story.
What is the remaining setback on the 33rd Street side?
It'll be roughly just shy of 3 feet. And if you look at all the other dwellings or buildings on 33rd, both north and south of Clinton, they go right up to the alleyway line, including Edge 32 to the north, all the way through residential garages marching south.
Okay.
It's not.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Was there a determination or a reason for why you didn't want to replicate, in terms of similar language, the porch style of the roof on the existing house instead of doing the kind of pediment style on the garage?
2 reasons. I'm a classicist at heart, and I love classical architecture. And it's primarily a private-facing view, a garden-facing view, which is not public-facing. If you wanted a historic reference point, I would point to a couple other Greek revivals on the house. On the street. But that's the reason.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think either would work. It's more a question of, do you want to replicate the language or establish a new one?
Right. I understand.
And those 2 trees along the 33rd Street side, you're not going to have this new construction isn't going to interfere with.
No, in fact, once construction is complete, that hornbeam hedgerow that you see there will continue from the building southward all the way to the corner of the fence there. So that'll be an entire then wall of hornbeams.
As always, David's work in your direction is beautiful. I have similar ideas to Chris, like, that is a very strong Greek revival element, but if that's what your heart wants and it's an interior face, then I don't think I have any opposition to that. I think my only consideration would perhaps be the roof line. And if it's not that I'm opposed to what's here, I think it's fine. But I also wonder, like, was it considered to do more of like a cornice flat roof appearance?
Yep.
Kind of like how your side massing is on the original, and the current garage kind of has that cornice.
If you may recall, there was an earlier rendering that was presented to the Block Club that
Yes.
did have a flat roof, but it also had what's sometimes called a pilot house at the top. I think what we saw from one of your projects 2 weeks ago. And for a variety of reasons, we decided to eliminate that. We thought this looked cleaner and simpler than adding that. But the cornice that you see here is the exact cornice to scale and everything is the cornice on the back half of our house.
Okay.
It's like,
That's fine. I also, maybe one thought is, and this is totally like a plan thing, is if the consideration where the bedroom portion of the suite, flipping it so that that bedroom can get views of the lake. Your gorgeous site. I know it's probably a privacy thing, but
we went up on the roof of the garage, and unfortunately, we don't think that they're going to get a view either way. But that's a good point, and maybe we'll do that.
yeah, maybe just to consider so that the toilet is not the only spot that gets the view or gets the light.
Views from the pool are important too.
That's true.
Sorry. Any other questions?
You said that side of the well, formerly the garage, it's less than 3 feet from the property line.
Yes.
There aren't any issues with having glazing in that wall. I wasn't trying to remember off the top of my head. I just wasn't sure if that would pose an issue.
Yeah, we do have a window there. You can see in this image on the alley side of it. We didn't want to put in a full full length window for security reasons.
Okay, I'm just I totally appreciate. I mean, window is good. I just wasn't sure if it was too close to the property line. Something code-wise to look into. I'm probably completely wrong.
If you look, Philip, if you look in this image, the house on the other side of the alley, you see how it goes right up to the bump out goes right up to the property line.
Yeah.
Goes on the first floor there. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I feel like
You're not wrong, Philip. It's 3 feet
okay.
side yard.
Thank you.
So that might be a consideration, Alex, with that one facing the not the alley side, because you're on an alley. So that is okay to have windows. The other side, but building housing might push back on that one window if it's within 3 feet. Prepared to eliminate that if you can't pull that in the last few inches to hit the 3 foot line.
Yep, that's exactly what I was thinking. Other than that, I mean, I don't love the roof, but I do see what you're going for. It is an interesting Greek villa feel on the inside that is different from me, but you know, I think it looks nice. It seems like a pleasant experience. So,
thank you.
So is it from these renderings, it appears that there's no color differentiation from body to trim. It's all the same color and only the windows are different?
It's the same to 100% the same materials that are existing, both on the garage and on the house, just continued for the full of the addition.
Okay, well, I would say this is a great start. So this is again only conceptual review you're looking for here, Alex?
Yes, they suggested I come to conceptual, and if there's major issues, then I will bring it back at our next time for a vote.
All right, well, I haven't heard any significant issues from this group, so say you're in good shape.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right, Jessica, I believe that concludes our agenda, does it not?
That's what we had.
All right, well then I think it's time to adjourn this meeting of the Ohio City Design Review Committee, and thank everyone for sticking around for the length of this meeting, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone.